and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council procedural notes. Aurora Town Council has resumed in-person meetings for council and staff members only. Residents who wish to view meetings of council should go to youtube.com/c/town-of-aurora/videos. Okay, a motion to approve the agenda with the added items. Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Gilliland, any comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Community presentations. We have 4.1, John Marshman, Vice President, Capital Facilities and Business Development, and Tyler Chalk, Vice President, Strategy, Analytics and Communications, Southlake Regional Health Center, regarding Southlake Regional Health Center's master plan update. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. And I believe my colleague Tyler Chalk will be listening, but was unable to attend in person by Zoom. Just a little order of, I believe I'm sharing the presentation tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. If you can confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I will simply adjust go into full screen mode. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, council members. I'm John Marshman. I'm the Vice President of Capital, Facilities and Business Development for Southlake Regional Health Center. And I'm grateful for your time this evening to discuss our exciting vision for a new Southlake. So many of you are likely quite familiar with Southlake and the exceptional care we provide, but you may not know that Southlake is one of the largest hospitals in Ontario with 550 beds and nearly 4,500 staff and physicians. Operating on a dual mandate, we provide core community services to Northern York and South Simcoe regions, while providing tertiary programs to a much broader catchment, with one of the largest regional cardiac programs and a provincially top-ranked cancer program. So the next couple of slides really help to frame the why or the need behind our master plan, which is really the ever-growing gap between the constraints of our existing facility or physical plant and the evolving care that we need to provide to our patients, compounded by the explosive growth of the communities that we serve. The current physical plant is challenged to meet both current demand and new and evolving infection prevention and control directives and best practices, nor can it really support any of the future growth. Much of our infrastructure dates back to the 60s and 70s. Buildings are either at the end of life, or systems infrastructure requires a complete overhaul to be able to support the current standards of care that we need to provide. Over the last year alone, we've had a number of infrastructure challenges, including a significant power outage, which really, these infrastructure challenges really challenge our ability to continue to deliver the quality care that we need to deliver. Maybe most poignantly, some of our master planning work identified that we require more than almost 90% more physical space to simply right-size our current units to contemporary standards. And again, this is just to maintain our current bed count, not factoring in the significant bed increase required now and in the future. And despite all of the above, and the fact that we serve one of Ontario's fastest growing and aging populations, Southlake has not had any significant acute care capital expansion since 2003. So I wanted to take a few slides to highlight some of the data that really underlines this need for a new Southlake. The first slide outlines the dramatic growth experienced by the communities that we served over the past decade and a half. As you can see from the data, the overall growth in our core catchment communities has significantly outpaced the province as a whole, 30% versus 13% for the province. And our compound annual growth rate outpaced the province by roughly double. Even our slowest growing community outpaced the province as a whole. If we move to the next slide, we can see it's even more striking how this growth translated into acute activity for Southlake. When we look at our bed count from 362 to 474, a 31% increase, and we're actually significantly higher than that currently. Our ED visits roughly doubled over this time frame to almost 112,000 annually. Acute discharges up nearly 50% along with patient days, and perhaps most markedly, our ALC or alternative level of care stats are up over 5 times and over 4 times respectively with respect to patient days and rate. Our inpatient surgeries also increased quite significantly. Again, Southlake's main campus has had no significant acute care capital expansion since 2003, and the incredible amount of growth in service provision that we've accommodated over the past couple of decades really highlights the extent to which we've outgrown our current footprint. So the next couple of slides outline hospital utilization specifically for residents of Aurora in 2019-20. With respect to inpatient care, in 2019-2020, the residents of Aurora had over 4,000 admissions to hospital, and almost 65% of these were to Southlake. In the same year, Southlake discharged over 24,000 patients, and Aurora represented nearly 11% of these. Similarly, when we look at our utilization of the emergency department, Aurora residents had almost 19,000 emergency department visits, or an average of about 52 per day, and almost 80% of these visits were at Southlake. Similarly, of the 112,000 visits at Southlake, Aurora accounted for 13% of them. So you can see from an emergent care perspective and an inpatient care perspective, Southlake is supporting the majority of the volume. So we've talked a little bit about the past and the present. So these next few slides really look to our future growth in demand for services. This graph shows the expected 20-year growth in the need for inpatient services for all the 76 subregions across Ontario. The data is assembled by Prayer Group, a consultant, using an age-weighted methodology, which really breaks down the population by age cohort, looks at the historical healthcare utilization of each of these cohorts, and then projects forward based on the anticipated population growth for each cohort. You can see Northern New York region sits very near the top of these. And when we look at the next slide and zoom in on the regions in the top tier for inpatient growth, all of the other top tier regions either have a new hospital or have an approved hospital expansion in development, with Southlake highlighted there in orange as an outlier, having not had anything since 2003. Again, similarly, when we look at the next slide, the communities we serve are also among the fastest aging in Ontario. And this aging population, we know, drives utilization, it drives acuity, and it drives cost. Patients over 65 represented 42% of our discharges and 59% of our costs in 2019-2020. Similarly, Northern New York region, depicted in red, sits among the top regions for seniors growth. And in the next slide, similar to our previous story, when we zoom in on those regions at the top tier for seniors growth, all of the other regions either have a new hospital or have an approved hospital expansion significantly along the way. So in summary, when we looked at our past growth and our current utilization, our future projected growth, the data really does tell the story and underline the need for a new Southlake. So I wanted to take a couple slides just to highlight our master plan more specifically. So our master planning exercise looked at all of the projected growth and future demand for services, and then worked to align this data with our neighboring health facilities, including Markham-Stouffville, Royal Victoria, and of course, Mackenzie, just to ensure there was no data overlap or double counting of these growth numbers. We reviewed and developed, of course, multiple options, including a redevelopment of our existing site. And this option really proved non-viable through our analysis for a few reasons. One, the existing site is quite small and landlocked relative to the requirement for the bed base that we're looking for. We really need anywhere from 60 to 100 acres, and the existing site is less than 20. Secondly, there is a large underground water table issue that would preclude some of the required underground waterworks. And third, and maybe most importantly, is around trying to build the plane and fly the plane at the same time. It's around the complexity of redeveloping a hospital. Well, the hospital has to continue to operate to serve our patients. It's going to take considerably longer. It'll create significant challenges for our existing operations and ultimately drive a much greater cost for the project than a greenfield solution. So the preferred option really involves a new acute greenfield site built to current standards and sized appropriately for our projected bed base, but we didn't want to simply replicate the existing site. So the preferred option, while it contemplates this new greenfield site with a very acute focus, we look to reconfigure our existing Davis Drive campus for ambulatory and lower acuity services with a particular focus on geriatrics, relocating our ALC population or our alternative level of care population back to the Davis Drive site, consolidating ambulatory services, which are supporting the geriatric population to really create this one-stop shop. As a core partner in our Ontario Health team, we have this opportunity to then provide space opportunities for some of our smaller Ontario Health team partners to really create this campus of care, providing the benefits in terms of reduced overhead to some of our smaller health partners in the community, but maybe most importantly, benefiting the patients in this one-stop shop experience that an OHT hub can provide. I think ours is the first master plan to contemplate the OHT or the Ontario Health Team model, which is pretty exciting for us and garnering some interesting attention from the ministry. So lastly, I just wanted to highlight some of the opportunities for you and your constituents to stay involved and to support. First, I think to help the community stay informed and engaged, we've established a webpage, Southlake.ca, where folks can go to get an overview of the need, the plan and the process that we go through, as well as receive updates on where we're at and some community engagement opportunities as they come up. Secondly, I'd note that nothing really resonates like supportive correspondence directly from individual community members. So we encourage you to really encourage your constituents to write to their local MPP. A short note can go a long way in terms of helping the need resonate beyond just ourselves. And lastly, just making sure that we spread the word. It takes a village. Or perhaps the better part of 2 regions to build a hospital, and so we encourage you to encourage your constituents to join the choir for a new Southlake. So this ends the formal presentation. I have included some slides in the appendix that you can reference at a later time, provide some additional data, and also outline some of the more immediate projects that we're undertaking to better support our community, in particular our mental health initiative, and to highlight some further opportunities for the community to get engaged. With that, I'll turn it over to the chair for questions.
Thank you, John, very much for the presentation. Council, can I get a motion to receive presentation? Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Is there any comments or questions? Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Southlake, for all of us, and in particular myself, from a personal perspective, having such a great hospital with amazing talent, have the right equipment, the right space to fulfill the needs of our community is essential. You may not have heard, but earlier one of our councillors had their daughter in Emerge today, and she really appreciated and loved the support. And I normally do too, but I have noticed the crowding. It's something like shockingly different than it was years ago. So the fastest growing and the fastest aging is probably not that much of a surprise if you use the hospital a lot. So I appreciate the presentation. Can we actually use some of your slides to, your actual slides to communicate with our residents? and our other, MPs, MPPs to help in other manners to get the messages up there, because it's very critical that we do what we need to do to expand our hospital the way it needs to in the future to help our
Councillor, and
residents.
John, I'll let you answer, but I think that
I think I heard
it
you
is up
say
on
that.
it is up on the website. Am I correct, John?
Oh,
And
it's
then
on the
you'll
website?
and I've already asked if you could provide that for us as well in a link, and so I can pass it along to all the councillors.
That's correct. I believe a copy has been shared with the clerk. So, and I just would take a second to thank you for your comment and for the anecdote. The amazing care that we deliver is the sum of all of the anecdotes of those experiences, and so it's great to hear the engagement, and I really appreciate your willingness to support. Thank you.
Thank you. And through Mr. Mayor, just a side note, full disclosure, I have a best friend of mine who is a nurse at the hospital, and complete dedication and motivation to give their all and their best, but they do see the amount of patients and they want to fulfill everyone, every single person is important. So anything we can do to help, I think is hearing the day-to-day people on the, their feet on the ground, serving our community, and anything we can do to help is so important. And I don't know if you know this, but Mr. Mayor helped us, and the council members, Run for Southlake is always contributing in different ways to the hospital, a little different than this, but we're quite an active council and community for the hospital. So your messaging is loud and clear, and I'm looking forward to doing everything I can to help us spread the message as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gaertner, then Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gaertner.
Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Marshman. And I know that, especially with respect to emergency, I had the displeasure to visit there. Your CEO, Art and Crystal, and staff have done a really great job reorganizing Emerge since we had a council tour of the hospital. But especially during COVID, there's just not enough space to do distancing, and so it is very tight. I would like to congratulate the hospital on its expansion of mental health, the mental health facility. It was very small. When I attended in the council chamber a couple of years ago, the presentation from Southlake about the various possibilities that we could go forward with, what you've described is one of them, but the issue of needing so many new acres of space, I'm assuming to do the acute care part of the hospital service. Where are we going to find that?
Mr. Marshman.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your question. This is a moment I wish I were a magician and
Right.
could pull an answer out of my hat. There are across the catchment area that we serve, opportunities. At this point, we have not landed on a specific site, but are looking at a number of opportunities and opening our doors to further opportunities to be able to, I think maybe I'll talk just a little bit about the process of selecting a site, which is, really around, the primary driver or the primary consideration is around optimizing access for those we serve. So
Yes.
we're going to look at a site that has access to transit, that's sort of centrally located based on the demographic and the concentrations of populations. I think the second piece is, I think understanding that the government doesn't fund everything in these projects. We're going to look at opportunities for lands that may come as donations or as partial donations to help manage some of our local share burden as well. I think, I don't have a specific answer because we haven't got to the point of selecting a site. That's something that we'll do in the next phase. But the sort of next stage that we're going through is getting, is soliciting Treasury Board and Ministry confirmation and approval for a large planning grant to continue that work to identify the site.
Councillor.
Well, speaking on behalf of my residents, I suppose in a way we're a little bit spoiled because we can travel to the hospital even from the south end of town in between 10 and 15 minutes. So that access piece that you're talking about, that's going to be very important. And yeah, I wish us good luck with all of this because it's certainly well overdue with respect to need.
Thank you very much. And perhaps just in closing to that question, I'll comment further that access again is the primary consideration in selecting a site. And we're certainly looking to not only preserve the access we have, but to do what we can to enhance it for the catchments that we serve.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, do you have an idea when we're going to be able to do this? And how long it will take to build a new acute care center?
So, thank you, sir. We typically work with a timeline of about 8 to 10 years from approval. And that's really driven by the sort of comprehensiveness of the process to go through the design phases. So right now we've submitted our master plan, which is sort of the high level blocks and the high level box of what we think this needs to be. As we go into the next stage of functional programming to actually define the clinical programs and the clinical volumes, block schematics to translate those into actual boxes and building blocks, and then detailed design and procurement. And so those phases drive the project, the process. You know, it can be expedited, but we're working generally with an 8 to 10 year time horizon at this point.
Councillor.
And what are we gonna do in the meantime?
Mr. Marshman.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a very good comment, and you know, I think it's very easy for hospitals to and to think about, you know, large scale solutions. But to your point, we have 10 years of care or 8 years of care to deliver in the meantime in an overcrowded facility. So there are, you know, firstly, I would draw attention to a number of projects, not the least of which be the mental health project that you identified before, which is really around creating capacity within our emergency department and providing the right kind of space for those patients. Similar projects are planned to expand our capacity within the existing site. But I think, you know, I think part of the advantage of this sort of strategy to build an acute site and to repurpose the Davis Drive site means that it enables us to when we get into the next phases of design, to look at early works projects that really help to enable and support some of the care that we're delivering now, and to be able to prepare the site for what it will become in the future. So we'll be looking, in other words, we can continue to make investments in the existing site rather than abandoning it entirely.
Councillor.
And if I just may suggest to you, when you added that COVID testing facility, you know, that was done through tenting. And I think there might be room to do something like that for the emergency department, for those patients who are able to go outside and want to be more physically distanced, because that was not possible at the time when I went and I suggested it. And one of the things was we just don't have enough money. So, but I think there is room there to, the emergency department is way overcrowded. So thank you. If we could maybe consider something like tenting.
Thank you. You are preaching entirely to the choir when you say the emergency department is overcrowded.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. The presentation to me is somewhat alarming that we're not as far ahead as other municipalities have had very similar growth. And as you've already mentioned, these types of things take years and years and years. So I'm concerned on many fronts in terms of the situation, although you just described some interim measures, is only going to get worse. And on your last slide, you had mentioned, that we can reach out to our MPP and communicate the need for expansion or a new hospital. And I'm wondering from the hospital's perspective, whether you've engaged with the MPP in the riding, which is the Minister of Health, and what response have you had from her?
Mr. Marshman?
Thank you very much, Councillor, and an excellent point. So we've had a comprehensive engagement, not only with our local MPP, Christine Elliott, but a number of members of Parliament, the chair of the Treasury Board, and a number of other local MPPs to make sure that this is this need for Southlake, this need for this community is comprehensively understood as the application goes through the appropriate channels. Apologies if there's thunder in the background. We're experiencing a little thunderstorm here. In addition, we've had conversations with the CEO of Ontario Health, Matt Anderson. So this need, the information shared today has been shared comprehensively with our local politicians and with senior politicians in the Ontario government.
Councillor?
Thank you. And through Mr. Mayor, are you concerned that we'll get to a point where there's something critical that is happening that we can't service the residents? I mean, from the presentation, it seems quite dire.
Mr. Marshman?
Hospitals and health systems are incredibly adept at managing in less than ideal circumstances. I think, certainly the experience of the pandemic, I think has further highlighted that. So in terms of, I would comment to say that I don't believe there's an imminent threat of failure, but that I believe that it is of the utmost importance that we are able to move this project forward in the near future.
Councillor?
Thank you, and I guess we can agree on that based on the information that's been provided. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Councillor Gallo and I had a similar thought with regards to the response from our MPs and MPPs. So just to say that, I too, like many, have had the pleasure or depending on the situation of utilizing Southlake. And certainly, I've always been amazed at the work that the doctors and nurses and everyone involved have done there. And I think we all recognize the challenges in front of you, and we all see that more and more you're doing more with less, and we recognize that. So you did touch upon the fact that throughout the GTHA, we've seen new hospitals come online, Humber River, Vaughan, and so forth. And then Southlake is long overdue. So I certainly appreciate you coming before us and keeping us updated and aware of the challenges as well as the future plans. And I would hope you would continue to keep us involved and engaged, even though physically Southlake is in Newmarket. We certainly see as an integral part of our community and paramount to the quality of life of our residents, and anything we can do to advocate and or move the ball forward to get the needs of the hospital addressed. I'm certainly all for it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Mr. Marshman, thank you very much for coming. I just quickly add, if you could pass along our thanks from our residents, and I think the residents from across York region, for all the work that all the workers at Southlake, the frontline workers, have done over the last 18 months. They've done a tremendous job making sure that we all remain safe throughout this pandemic. And so we're very grateful for all the work that all of you have done for the residents of this town. So thank you very much from that perspective. And as far as from a new hospital, it's an absolute need, as has been mentioned right across this table. And I know you and I have had this discussion, but I'll ask each and everyone sitting here, council members, please tell our residents to contact our MPPs, get the word out there. We need them to know how important it is that we get this new hospital in York Region, and especially in Northern York Region. So, Mr. Marshman, thank you very much for coming this evening. We appreciate it, and we look forward to being updated and for that day when you can come and announce that there's a new hospital that's going to be built in Northern York Region.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members, and have a good evening. And I hope we can look forward to that ribbon cutting together.
Absolutely. Council, call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next, we have delegations. We have 5.1, Christine Chevrier, resident, regarding item 8.2, PDS 21-091, request for a parking bylaw amendment on Benville Crescent.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Christine.
So the reason I wanted to be a delegate is we got a letter in our door stating that currently parking is permitted on both sides, but that they're talking about restricting parking on the street. And I think the reason was that some residents brought up a petition because at the peak of COVID, there was definitely some issues, some bad behavior by some people parking on the street. And I understood their concerns. But ever since things have opened up in terms of parking at Shepherd's Bush and things like that, it's just simply no longer an issue. And so I just wanted to ensure that parking wouldn't be restricted, as a lot of the people on Benville Crescent use the street parking, and we just don't want to have signs going up saying you can't park on this side or that side of the street kind of thing. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Christine. So first, I'll just ask Council, can I get a motion to receive and refer to item 8.2? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys. Questions for the delegate? Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you very much for delegating this evening. I really appreciate it. Just a quick question. So you're confirming that you just want the parking to go back to the way it was before? It was fine parking on both sides. You're okay with that?
Christine?
I think the parking near the park itself was the issue.
Yes.
And the letter I got explained that parking would be restricted at somewhere at the complete opposite end. So it doesn't really make any sense. And a lot of people on the street I've talked to really don't want parking to be restricted. And they've emailed Michael Batt, I believe it is, and people have called in and stuff like that. And my only concern was if I don't speak up now and they do change the parking, it's going to be very difficult to undo. So I just wanted to make it clear that I think it was an issue. It is no longer, and we just want to leave it as it is.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak today. And Councillor Humphreys had asked a similar question. As far as a follow-up to that, did you say it was the other end that they were going to put the restricted parking not in front of the park area?
Yes, the letter indicates that the parking, so what happens is it's a crescent, so basically like a big U shape. And the area by the park is a lot wider when you're turning that corner than the opposite end, which goes into the gated community. And so at that end, it's much more narrow. And so they're basically saying that the parking width at that end going around that corner, they were recommending to restrict parking on the northeast side of Benville Crescent.
Councillor?
Thank you. And to your knowledge, was there an issue with the parking at that strip that kind of spawned this request, or is this specific to a lot of traffic that was in and around the actual park on the other end?
Yeah, the petition began specifically for people parking by the park on both sides. And then so when people were trying to turn the corner, they had very little, apparently, ways to get around all the vehicles. I never had an issue because we have a very wide paved area by the house. It's kind of like used to be gravel, but now it's paved. So there was maybe some times where it was restricted, and especially the people who live up that way probably had some issues. But like I said, it's no longer a problem because Shepherd's Bush parking is open again, and I feel like it's passed.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I did take a drive on that street today just to take a look to understand the area a bit. And it is very wide, like you said, plenty of space to park. And also that's where all your mailboxes are located. So I'm sure a lot of people stop to get their mail as well.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't want to see that hinder. Did you, were you a part or aware of any petition or any emails that were sent around in your neighborhood? Because it was my understanding there were some residents on the street that perhaps, you know, were advocating for this, but I don't know if that reflects a true reflection of the entire street since it is a smaller area.
Christine?
Once I had someone come to my door asking me to sign the petition, and I explained to them that I didn't have any issue with people wanting to park and take off their bikes and go for a walk on the trail. To me, it's not a problem. And I think a lot of people whom I spoke to afterwards, because I wanted to understand once I got this letter, what it all meant, because I think this petition was started a long time ago. They were told me they didn't understand that was what was going on. Excuse me. My dog is tripping on the cable. They thought that they were going to restrict parking at the park only. They didn't understand that there was a potential for restricting parking on our street, and they didn't want that. And then once they'd heard that, I think I told people, well, you should call or email, and I think they have. So I'm not sure what Michael received, but.
Councillor?
Great. Thank you so much for the clarity. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Gaertner?
I also thank you for coming forward. I think part of the problem that is the trailhead. So it's not only a park, but it's a trailhead. And I guess a lot of people were using the trails during COVID. So I thank you for coming forward because we do need to find a compromise between having enough parking and also having enough parking for the residents, because that's quite a dense area. So just thank you for coming forward. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Councillor. Is everyone okay?
Oh.
Okay. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Things are falling apart here. Ms. Chevrier, I appreciate you coming this evening. Just to, I guess, follow up on that point with regards to your observations. You had indicated that you don't feel that there's an issue anymore. So the report before us talks about the fact that the petition came to us in May, and that out of the 41 households, 30% or 30 households had signed it, roughly 73%. And I guess I just wanted to get a better understanding, in your opinion, on what might have driven them to sign the petition at the time, and why you don't feel like it's a true reflection of the results now. Partly you've answered that with regards to COVID and perhaps not understanding it. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Christine?
Yes, as I explained, when it would be busy, there would be people parking on the street, and some people did some things like, you know, throwing garbage in the ditch, and, you know, but I think that was more bad behavior on their parts, and I think that angered some residents. I mean, there's still some residents on our street, maybe 4 houses, that have cones on the road that they don't want people to park in front of their homes. So, I mean, some people may still feel that they want parking restricted, but again, they want it restricted by the park. And this letter was indicating that the parking would be restricted at the complete other end. So it's not really, I think, even addressing that concern. But again, we took some pictures on the weekend. There was no vehicles on the streets. So I don't think it's, I agree it was an issue, but I just don't feel it is any longer.
Thank you very, very much. Just one last question for you, Mr. Mayor, is that, do you feel that if the town conducted a survey with the current residents, that perhaps the end results would be different and perhaps a little bit more clearer for the residents of what's being proposed?
Christine?
Sorry, I thought you said Mr. Mayor. I think that they did. Didn't they conduct a survey already?
Sorry, I'm saying if we did one now, if the town did the survey with the residents and talked to them about the proposal, do you feel that the results would be different than what was presented before?
I think so, because a lot of the people I spoke to did not want parking restricted on the streets. A lot of people need the parking on the streets for their extra vehicles.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Christine, thank you very much for coming this evening and joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening.
Council, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Council will move to consent agenda. We have one item on that. Anyone have any questions on that or comments? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, is that
receive
the,
information. Someone like to move that? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Gaertner, you wanted to speak?
is this about the Lake Simcoe?
Yes, it is.
Doesn't seem to be a very long agenda tonight. May I make some comments?
Absolutely. It's your memo.
Well, it gets put on with or without me. The first one was about the water conditions. In June, we were, I would say, getting close to perhaps a crisis level about the low level of the water. I was going to email you, but I was told that if it happened, that our staff would be informed. So I'm thinking that that has not happened at this point, that we need to put water restrictions in place.
I'll have to get you that answer, Councillor.
Thank you. I think you would have notified us, so I'm going to assume that that's done. The Bradford bypass, was a really big issue at the meeting. There's a highway going through a lot of environmental land, but it is a provincial highway. And we have no place, and the Lake Simcoe Authority has no place except advice if they're asked. But we're going to have an update at the September meeting. With respect to the strat plan, very interesting. It's the first time it was ever done in-house. The communications department did it. They did a brilliant job. It'll be finalized this year and implemented in 2022. Just want to note that because of COVID, we got way behind on the plantings that we do, that the authority does, which are so important for the tree canopy, but they've managed to catch up quite a bit. And there is going to be an online financial update for municipal funding partners. We've asked this question before in council. Are we going to be consulted? So there is going to be a financial update for municipal funding partners in the fall, and the authority will be coming to us for the budget presentation in the fall, winter. And we are pegging, or the authority is pegging inflation at 2%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Those want to call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next, we have the advisory committee meeting minutes. We have one on there. Someone like to move, receive for information? Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Gilliland. Are there any questions on that one? Nope. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We're moved to consideration of items requiring discussion. Council, I'm going to move 8.2 forward if everyone's fine with that. All right, seeing no objections. So we'll do 8.2, which is PDS 21-091, request for parking bylaw amendment on Benville Crescent. Council, I just asked so we can put this on the table that maybe we just receive this at this moment. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Humphreys, second. Councillor Thompson, comments or questions? Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. I don't know if Mr. Waters is around or if Mr. Batts is around. Just some of the questions we heard tonight. It looks like this probably should go back another little review, and to Councillor Gilliland's and Councillor Thompson's points earlier, perhaps there's a bit of an update that may need to be required. As we heard, a lot of this was probably invoked through this situation with COVID and things were happening that wouldn't normally happen day to day. Sounds like the residents were happy with their parking situation before this time. So maybe another review would be a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Waters.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we recognize this is a COVID triggered situation in terms of everything being closed and people looking for recreation. We do have an alternative recommendation for you, number 2, that speaks to what Councillor is suggesting.
Perfect. Sorry, I didn't see.
Councillor
Should have
Humphries,
looked
do
at
you
the
see that?
alternative. Yeah, I think good point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to you, as Mr. Waters suggesting this option 2, which is probably a good option.
It would be option 2 is that staff monitor the on-street parking activity on Benville, Cres, and around Evans Park and report back to a future general committee meeting with the results and recommendation before the end of 2021.
Perfect. I think that suits us perfectly
Okay.
tonight.
But
Sorry.
I'll just go to the other
I'm fine.
speakers, and then once everyone's done, then we can finalize what we're going to do. Councillor Gilliland.
Hello. I was just going to say the same thing as Councillor Humphries and recommend that as well. So
Okay.
leave it at that.
All right. I'll go to Councillor Thompson then, and then I'll come back to both of you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I mean, the situation reminds me of many others that have come before council, most recently, I guess, Kitimat, where you've had one group of residents expressing one viewpoint. And then as we go through these conversations, we learn that there are other residents on the street that may not necessarily agree. And there are discrepancies within terms of the survey or data or the results. And I just think that I'm fine with going forward with the alternative number 2. And if staff are going to come back with any sort of recommendations at the end of the 2021, I think I'd appreciate it if it was actually the town that surveyed the residents themselves, made it crystal clear what's being proposed, and get those results. So there's no misunderstanding or misinterpretations of what's being proposed, and it's clear what the majority of the residents want or don't want. And so that way, we as a collective group have all the correct information in front of us to be well informed and make whatever the best decision is at that time. I appreciate that the motion just speaks to monitoring it, but I would like to see it go beyond that, when the time is right, that survey take place or some additional measures take place to get the feedback of the 41 households on the street.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Waters, would it be doable to survey the residents in the area as well with something from the town?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, absolutely. We can add that on to the monitoring of the on-street parking where we can survey the residents.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. So there's no other comments or questions. I'll go back to Councillor Humphries. You want to add that as an amendment, which is alternate option 2 with it. Yeah, should say staff monitor the on-street parking activity on Benville, Cres, and around Evans Park and survey street residents and report back to a future general committee meeting with the results and recommendations before the end of 2021. Is that good, everyone? Yep. Councillor Gilliland, you want to second that amendment? Thank you. Does anyone want to speak to that, or am I just going to call that one on the amendment? Wendy, you want to, Councillor Gaertner, you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Thompson, I agree with the proposed motion. I think Councillor Thompson's point is very good. It's a very dense area. We want to not cause any hardship to the residents, but we do have to remember that there's a trailhead there. So we want to make sure that, there is adequate parking for people that use that trail. We have to find a fair compromise with that, and maybe there is no problem with the trailhead parking, but it is something that needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others to the amendment? Can we get that on the screen? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Back to the main motion as amended. If there are no other comments, I'll just call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Council will go back to 8.1 now. CS 21-067 proposed noise bylaw update. Recommendations: 1, that report number CS 21-067 be received, and 2, that the proposed noise bylaw be brought forward to a future council meeting for enactment, repealing and replacing the current noise bylaw number 4787-06P. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, seconder. Councillor Humphreys, comments or questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess is it Mr. Ray or Miss Van Leeuwen that's online?
Sorry, Councillor, could you say that again?
Is it Mr. Ray who wrote the report or Miss Van Leeuwen who's online? I can't tell.
Miss Van Leeuwen's online.
Miss Van Leeuwen. Through you to Miss Van Leeuwen. Miss Van Leeuwen, I was looking at the results, and I guess, you know, there's no doubt that our policy is outdated and needs updating. But I guess one of the concerns I had is that if you look at attachment 3 in the summary, or was it attachment 2? Which one was the survey?
It is
Sorry, it's attachment
3, attachment 2, sorry, attachment 2, number 3 on our thing, on our e-scribe.
Just give me 1 second if you don't mind. No, it was the last one, the attachment of the noise bylaw review survey that was done by a third party. So in question 11, it talks about that it asked the recipients whether or not they felt that the bylaw was sufficient to address their concerns. And I think it was 60% of them said no. And so I noted that in the report, you took the other perspective and said that, you know, 42.9% felt that the bylaw will address the issues. So I guess I'd like to take that counterpoint and just sort of understand why the majority of the recipients felt that the noise bylaw would not help the noise pollution. And really, does that mean that we should continue to look to refine this and build upon this, and that it's not yet ready yet?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the results of the survey does address what you've commented on. Now, it could be a number of things. As stated in the report, one of the noises that was identified as an issue is noises related to vehicles. And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to address that, because that's a police matter under the Highway Traffic Act. So that it could be a number of things in terms of why the response is what it is. But in the report, it does state that 90% of the respondents believe that the noise bylaw should be updated. And this provides more of a general prohibition in terms of persistent noise that is unreasonable at the point of reception.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I do agree it needs updating and there are issues that need to be addressed. I guess my question really is around, you know, if we're going to do it, let's make sure we get it right. And I was concerned that the fact that, you know, the majority were still wanting more or looking for issues to understand it. If we feel confident that that's really due to the fact that there are areas that we are outside of our jurisdiction and we can't control, then, you know, that helps me to understand where that, you know, variance or deficiency is. But for now, I'll listen to the other comments around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo?
If we're talking about a noise bylaw under, it's page 46, attachment 1, number 5.1, powers of entry, inspection, and prohibits. So we're talking about a noise bylaw, somebody making excessive noise. Maybe someone can help me if this is something we can do. it says that a municipal law enforcement officer or any other individual authorized to enforce the bylaw on behalf of the town may at any reasonable time enter upon any land for the purpose of carrying out an inspection to determine whether the following are being complied with. And this is the bylaw, permission to use, et cetera, et cetera. Can you just maybe help me understand? I get that while I'm not a big fan of it, I get it for maybe some other reasons, but take a look at a deck or something that's happened. But for a noise bylaw, why would we want to enter any land for the purpose of carrying out the inspection of a noise bylaw?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so that we are able to identify the individual that may be in violation. So if there's a party happening in the rear yard, without these permissions, we would not be able to enter onto those lands to collect the evidence required.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, is it council that is authorizing, giving the authorization in order to do this? Is it us that's giving that authorization for a bylaw officer to go on any land? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these are provisions that are recommended by our prosecutor, as well as they are common in most bylaws. We do have a standard operating procedure in place with respect to power of entry onto private property, and we are following that procedure, and that procedure was endorsed by council a couple of years ago.
Councillor?
Thank you. I think I remember that. Bit of a discussion.
Yeah, so Councillor, just to refresh everyone, we made some, I would say, major changes as far as what the powers are as far as bylaw entering onto any private property. So there are some procedures in place that do afford some protections to private property owners.
Yeah, I didn't see it in this. I thought that was the case, but it just seems to me very abrupt just reading it. The only other thing is there still exists, I think it's the solid waste collection. It's on page 59, attachment 3, number 3, solid waste collection, an attempt to reduce traffic on town roadways and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from large trucks idling. The proposed bylaw allows for solid waste collection between 5 and 11 p.m., 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. in areas that are not zone residential or abut residential area. Can you give me a sense, through you, Mr. Mayor? Is there data that specifies that doing this would reduce greenhouse gases? Like where do we come up with this?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is through, I guess, Ministry of Transportation. They have suggested this over the years that we modify to reduce traffic congestion and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that is one of the reasons that the Municipal Act was amended to prohibit us from regulating the delivery of goods and supplies to various businesses, as stated in the report.
Councillor?
And just to that point, because I saw this there and I also read that, and I guess the ministry hasn't yet approved that, or there's regulation, maybe they approve it, there's regulations that we're waiting for. So does that mean we would be amending this based on the regulations that come out, or how would that work?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Municipal Act has been amended, as stated in the report, and I believe it takes effect September 19th, but the regulations have not yet been released. And so we are not certain what the specific wording of those regulations are, and if it would enable us to include some wording in our bylaw with respect to that.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I don't know if anyone else would like this, but I'd like some more information, perhaps whatever you received from the ministry in terms of just quantifying any data or anything that stipulates that doing this would reduce the greenhouse gases. If you have any of that information, I would really like to see it before council meeting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that might be very challenging to get that data.
Maybe I could just suggest, Ms. Van Loen, maybe we could send out an email to the Minister of Transportation and just ask them, the ministry if they can provide that information for us. And I mean, the answer that we get, Councillor, is the answer that we get, but we can definitely, I think we can ask them to get us that information.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, if we based one of these things on that information, shouldn't we have that information? You know, that's what I asked. What is the background to do this? And I was told that it's based on some ministry guidelines.
Ms. Van Loen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, for clarity, there have been comments made by the ministry, but the data has not been shared, and so it would take some research, and we can certainly reach out and ask.
Could you, through you, Mr. Mayor, at a minimum, give me what you have that based this on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these were comments from a few years ago, but our traffic analyst, Michael Batt, might have some of that information, as in the past, the traffic analyst has been involved in those conversations, so I can certainly find whatever information is available.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, the reason I'm asking is because I believe that this is significant, because there are, and I'm not going to lie, I'm one of them, that abut commercial enterprises, and this would significantly change the way they operate. And if there's data out there that says we're going to reduce greenhouses gas, I'm all on board, but I want to see it.
Absolutely. Ms. Van Loen, if we can try to get that information before council, that would be much appreciated, I think, by everyone sitting at this table.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will definitely reach out and see what information I can obtain.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gaertner next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Van Leeuwen, and of course, Mr. Ray. I think this has been a huge task, and just want to say I appreciate your work on this. It's a tough one, and it's becoming tougher because the world is getting noisier. And as a councillor, I hear from residents about the noise, and I also have a problem with the noise that I reported to Mr. Batt a couple of years ago, as I live adjacent to a loading dock, unfortunately. And I'd like to comment that, you know, you redid the survey, and it's just apparent that a lot of people don't do surveys. So I guess we'll have to accept the answers that we have as representatives. Through the years, I've had 4 main complaints for noise. Addressed in the report is the one on, for example, St. John Side Road, where we've got a lot. It's a truck route, and it's a straightaway, and there's a lot of motorcycles, and there's just a lot of noise there. And we can't do anything about it because that would belong to the police. And people need to understand that. But I think where we do have a place, this is to you, Mr. Waters, is that when we're planning these subdivisions, and we've mostly planned them all, but when we're planning them, especially on these very busy streets, and in particular on the window streets that are closest to these busy roads, I think we need to do more noise attenuation, more screening. It wouldn't cost the developers a lot of money, but it would make a huge difference to the residents. We just need to be more careful about, these are our future residents, so they're not going to know about these issues when we're doing the planning. So we need to take care of them, and noise is a big one. And as it says in the survey, Ms. Van Leeuwen, it's they're talking about stress and sleep disturbances. And, it is a big problem. going back to what Councillor Gallo was discussing, garbage collection was not allowed between the hours of 11 and 7, I believe, in our old bylaw. It had nothing to do with fumes or air pollution, but it had to do with noise. I think it was 11 to 7. It was extremely hard to enforce. I spoke to Mr. Ray about it. But you know, it's not fair to the residents, and there are lots of residents along the Yonge Street Strip and along Bayview that are close to grocery stores and big box stores, and they take the garbage between 3 and 4 in the morning. And I unfortunately know firsthand about that, Ms. Van Leeuwen. So with respect to what we've got now, it's between 11 and 5. And to me, that's definitely part of the noise bylaw. It's very jarring noise. The garbage collection is very jarring noise. So I would actually like to see that go back to the 7 o'clock in the morning. And then the question is, in any case, how are we going to enforce the garbage trucks that come at 3 to 4 in the morning? It is a regular occurrence. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we receive a complaint of a waste collection occurring at 3 or 4 in the morning, and we are aware of that business, then we can modify the schedules of our officers to monitor and respond. But we need the specific information.
Councillor?
Thank you. And what is the specific information? If I call the next morning and say there was garbage picked up at 3 o'clock in the morning, then, I mean, how do you verify that?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, if it's a business and typically their waste collection may occur on the same days. And so if we have that information, oh, it's Wednesday mornings at typically around 4 a.m. Yeah.
It is Wednesday mornings. Okay, and it's always a late night with the council, so it's really a bummer. And you know, this is a big concern with what you said about the province during. There was a moratorium for 18 months with where goods and services were allowed to be delivered 24/7. So you think that, and you had said this to us before, you think that the province is going to put that in into legislation, that this can be done anytime. And this has nothing to do with what Councillor Gallo was talking about with the noise, with the air pollution. Just this was to support the businesses.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it has been confirmed that that amendment is has received royal assent, and that it will prohibit us from regulating. Now, what we haven't seen is the regulations associated with that prohibition.
Right.
But that prohibition is in effect and is permanent.
Thank you. And Councillor, you're at 5 minutes, so I'll. Oh, you got 10. I apologize, Councillor. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry, I apologize.
Thank you. I made that mistake once and stopped at 5. So the other issues are related to mostly noise and music coming from speakers in people's backyards. And it does say here, and I'll look it up for my next time, but you know that if it's audible from the point of, I'm sorry, whatever, delivery. But how on earth are we going to, how can we possibly regulate this? I mean, entry into the home, I don't know how this can be done, especially as these noise complaints will come the next day. People are not going to be calling town at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe they will, but that's not been what I've found. So How do you possibly cope with that?
Ms. Van
Through you,
Leeuwen?
Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if a bylaw receives a complaint at the time when the violation is occurring and we have an officer on duty, then we will respond to that complaint, gather the evidence, and take action. Hopefully we receive voluntary compliance. If it's an ongoing issue, we will also monitor based on information we've received. The police also have the authority to enforce our bylaw. So if it's happening in the evenings, late at night when we do not have an officer on duty, then residents can contact the police and they have the authority to enforce.
Thank you. Thank you. And just with for example, the issue with Aw Shucks, I think the speakers were pointed in the wrong direction, but you know, that isn't typical. It's more the backyard. And I was told that, or the email said that we only have a bylaw officer on till 10 o'clock on the weekends in the summer, or at least Friday and Saturday night till 10 o'clock. So someone was going to have to work overtime to go to Aw Shucks to make sure at 11 o'clock that the noise was silenced. So is this something we could consider in the summers when, of course, there's more outdoor activity, that we could just have bylaw as a matter of course and not have to pay them overtime to attend to these issues?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a resource issue, as our noise bylaw is not the only thing that they're dealing with. So there are multiple bylaws, property standards, that they are dealing with, and a lot of various case files. So it's about managing resources.
And further to that, we have a bylaw officer on, I think it's 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. I think that was in one of the emails I got, 6 o'clock on Saturday, 6 o'clock on Sunday. And, 6 o'clock on a Saturday, maybe, especially if we're doing a market at the town park, but 6 o'clock on a Sunday. So maybe we could just move someone from that time slot, just rejig their schedule so that somebody is attending Friday night and Saturday night till later than 10 o'clock at night.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the schedules are modified based on the activity and trends. So we do modify the schedules on an ongoing basis, depending on what is trending and what the volume of complaints we're receiving and what they are related to.
Well, then maybe you could let me know what our bylaw officers attend to on a Sunday morning between 6 and 8 in the morning. I'd just be curious to know what it is that requires the bylaw officer on at that time. The one of the other things that I'm getting more and more complaints about are things like leaf blowers that make a very high-pitched, invasive noise. There are companies that have worked on that and produced different equipment, and just the lawn care equipment in general. I'm just going to put that out there because I don't know what we can do about it, but that leaf blower it really is a very disturbing noise if you're sitting outside on a Sunday afternoon. The things that I'm not happy about are allowing noise on a Sunday morning from 9 to, help me out, Ms. Van Leeuwen, 9 to 5. I mean, and I spoke to that before and nobody seems to have the same concern that I do. So I'm just saying that as a comment. I think that there should be one day a week when people are not subjected to noise. I was pleased to see that noise is allowed if people are doing their own, home work, but not for contractors to come in and do. Could you just elaborate on that, please?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the bylaw does speak to residential renovations, and they have to either be done by the property owner themselves or the occupant, and not a third-party contractor.
Councillor?
So if somebody complained, then we would go over and check if it was a third-party contractor.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct.
Thank you. I must also be at my 10 minutes, Mr. Mayor. Can I continue, or have I hit my 10 minutes?
You got about 40 seconds left.
Then I'll wait. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Is this on? Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Van Leeuwen. I just want to touch base on that power of entry again to get some clarity on the language being used. You had mentioned in a conversation just now with Councillor Gaertner saying that you are hopeful if they have voluntary compliance. Yet in the power of entry point, it says any individual authorized to enforce this bylaw on behalf of the town may at any reasonable time enter upon any land for the purpose of carrying out an inspection. So I'm just a little confused because the language that's being shown at 5.1 it's very determined and very to the point, whereas you're using language hopeful of voluntary compliance. So is there a process that your officers are taking in order to actually collect this evidence in a manner that would allow them a bit more authority? Because I don't read that here based on the power of entry bylaw that we had passed earlier on in the term.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the power of entry operating procedures are not a bylaw themselves. They are a procedure that was endorsed by council that outlines when the officers have the authority to enter lands. And one of the reasons would be for the collection of evidence. This wording in this bylaw is wording that our prosecutor recommends. And it's based on legislation and power of entry legislation that is contained in various statutes and legislation.
Councillor?
Thank you. I guess I got to take some time to really look at this language. It reads to me that, you know, if someone was having a few people in their backyard, that they could have an officer interrupt them unexpectedly and go in any part of their property without any kind of notification. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, you know, what is the process as far as they knock on the door? Is there some sort of notification, or all of a sudden you just have some random person showing in your backyard? Because that's how I read it here.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as mentioned, this language is based on legislation and is contained in various legislations, including the Building Code Act, which is where our property standards bylaw comes from, and the Municipal Act. And as stated, our prosecutor recommends this wording, but we do have the standard operating procedure. So we do have some guidelines in place, and we are following those guidelines.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I guess I'll get back to this maybe offline, but I just for the public to know that the answer to the question I really want is whether or not that guideline is to be followed within the language it's being shown here. And I just want to ensure that those guidelines are being followed.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are following the guidelines and those guidelines were endorsed by council. So it does identify when we have the power of entry, but the officer also consults with the manager and gets the manager's input in terms of whether or not they enter the lands. One of the reasons, health and safety, the other, collection of evidence.
Councillor?
Thank you. And is Ms. DeSerio online tonight? Yes. So through Mr. Mayor to Ms. DeSerio, then Just reading the power of entry 5.1, is there any language here that specifies that the officer should be utilizing the guidelines that were set in place? Because the way I'm reading it does not necessarily stipulate that.
Mr. Serio?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the bylaw is just what gives the permission for the municipal officers to enter onto the lands. You will also note that it's a may and not a shall. Then as a result of that, no, the bylaw doesn't specifically say that the guidelines should be followed. However, as Ms. Van Leeuwen mentioned, because it's a guideline that's endorsed by council and it's one of the town's operating procedures, it is a guideline that must be adhered to in order to implement that section of the bylaw.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity there. Just a comment on the overall bylaw. I'm in favor of the Sunday 9 to 5. I know Ms. Councillor Gaertner is not really in favor of that. And I also think that if there was a third party doing, a deck for me, it would probably take a lot quicker than myself putting one together. I certainly have had some neighbors take on some projects that maybe will go on for about 6 weeks because, they're deciding to do a project on their own. So I certainly wouldn't want to hinder that opportunity, but I am glad to see that most of the residents agree based on the survey that they would like to continue to be able to have the privilege of doing home renovations and repairs on Sundays. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, many questions have been answered that I was thinking through. And I guess this is it's a lot of work here. It's very evident there's a lot of work, but in terms of, just my little concern, I wondered how we would, as we move forward to implementing some of these changes, there's a section, and I know we didn't have any real concrete noise bylaw to this extent previously. It was, as noted, built from the ground up. I think there's about 6 or 7, new areas of focus to be adhered to. When we implement something like this with so many changes, is there a way that we can, I'm sure we will anyway, but just through Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Van Leeuwen, is perhaps we can just monitor the issues, concerns, success, maybe some areas of tweaking. It looks like there's going to be lots of different approaches here that we didn't have before. And I mean, restrictions or changes. And I'm just a little bit nervous in terms of, we have to do something. But when there's such a large change, can we monitor and also maybe do a little bit of education when we do implement, perhaps start to include some of the changes in some of our communications to our residents to say, hey, did you know, this hour's from here to here, you need to be careful, and here, this is the type of things that we need to adhere to. So I think it's just something that we should consider. And I'm sorry if it's in here and I missed it. Lots to take in, but if there's something that we do have in terms of a knowledge information transfer or marketing for our residents, and just a monitoring for the success of these changes, and perhaps some, again, tweaks as we move forward through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly we will work with our communications team to educate our community on the changes. And we do collect information and data with respect to trends and what the types of complaints that we're receiving. And in the report, as you've seen, our complaints on with respect to noise have increased year over year.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor?
That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Gaertner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with respect to this, it says prohibitions. I'm on attachment 1, the noise bylaw. Or maybe it's 2. No person shall make or emit or permit any repetitive noise if it is audible at the point of reception. How do we figure that one out? How do we enforce that?
Ms. Van Loy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would respond to the complaint. And if the complainant is the neighbor, we go there and we,
Okay.
yes, we would identify, oh, that's the point of reception. Yes, that outdoor music is audible here.
Thank you. And also, sorry.
Ms. Van Loy, do you want to add to
No,
that?
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I would just spend my 5 minutes there. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add one more thing. We did receive final comments from our prosecutor, and we will be adding a couple of more definitions to ensure that it's fair and equitable and enforceable. And those include definitions of persistent, and he's suggesting that the prohibition also refers to unreasonable noise that is persistent. So we are going to define those 2 things, and we're also going to define the point of reception. And we're basing that on his suggested definitions based on his experience.
And for anybody listening or perhaps up for communication, there are special conditions for statutory holidays. That would be something that we would need to let our residents know. I'm looking for it and I can't find it, but I know I saw it. So there is an exception with the garbage pickup. It says that there's something about unless it's an abutting or adjacent area. So in my case, I am in an abutting or adjacent residential area. So does that mean that they can't do? I'm sorry. I should have made a note of it. I, of course, made a note of everything else but that. If you possibly can find it or send it to me. Garbage collection. Maybe it's 2.2.
Page 59, Councillor.
Page 59.
Yeah.
That speaks specifically to adjoining or abutting.
Ms. Van Loy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the bylaw does define abutting residential. So if you have a commercial property abutting a residential, then there are different restrictions in place, whereas our current bylaw is specific to zones. So the timelines and the activities change, and you could have a commercial adjacent to residential, and yet it only, the restrictions might be more generous for that commercial zone, even though it's adjacent to a residential. So we're trying to address that.
Well, speaking on the behalf of many residents who are in that position, that's just, I'm sorry, that's just not acceptable to, I understand we have to help our businesses, but if people are sleeping right next to a source of noise like a loading dock, I think the caution needs to fall on the side of those residents, especially if the residents were there first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's why we have included that in the updated bylaw. So we have addressed that by defining residential abutting and removing restrictions just related to a zone in like a commercial property specifically. Yes.
Then I must have misunderstood. And with respect to this, we can't control noise that is going to be made by governments, all levels of governments. But I do think it is fair that we notify residents in the area municipally, we notify residents in the area of work that's going to be done, especially during the night. That could be snow removal. And with respect to, we have this Metrolinx expansion coming up. I don't know if you can take this on, but there's going to be a lot of noise for a lot of residents, like thousands of residents near the rail line. Not even residents right at it, but residents in the area. So I think it's fair to notify. Maybe the province will do that, but I know that they don't always. I know the region doesn't always. So if there's anything you can do, and perhaps we can follow up on that to see how we can make sure that's done. There's nothing worse than, you know, an unexpected huge noise coming at you in the middle of the night. And you have no idea who's making it and why.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on the exempted activities, Schedule A, it does speak to the provincial government
Right.
and federal government, and they have an exemption clause, but there is a provision in there that talks about construction, rehabilitation, and maintenance done by York Region, Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, Toronto Conservation Authority, and utility companies, and they need to give us that notice prior to the work happening, so then we can we can provide notice to our residents or ensure they are providing that notice.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Mr. Mayor knows that didn't happen one time this summer, or maybe you know or not, Mr. Mayor. What about the province is not in there though, in that list?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have that authority because they are at the next level.
Councillor?
Going to be a lot of noise with Metrolinx, Mr. Mayor. We're all going to hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo, second time.
Quickly, in terms of abutting residential areas, I think just some work needs to be had there because I don't know what the definition of abutting is. The hydro corridor goes north and south, and to the east there's a lot of businesses, and then to the west there are a lot of homes. And while technically I guess those businesses don't abut all of those homes, noise certainly would travel from one area to another. But it just needs to be, I think it needs to be addressed. Just a quick question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Van Leeuwen. Currently, in terms of solid waste collection, is it, thought I heard you say that it's different across the board depending on where in the town a particular business is located in terms of hours of operation where they're allowed to pick up solid waste. Is that right?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the current noise prohibitions are dependent on the zones, but the actual provision, and it's dependent on the zones and the activity, but the waste collection is consistent across the board in terms of prohibited times for residential, commercial, and industrial, and it's between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. of the next day.
Oh,
Councillor?
Thank you. So the changes that's being contemplated on item 3 is from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. So 2 hours, giving them an additional 2 hours. Is that right?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct.
And
Councillor?
and that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm really curious to see the data behind that. I won't be supporting this for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Or call the vote? Seeing none. Ms. Van Leeuwen, I just want to clear up. I thought I heard you say that did you say that the temporary suspension of the noise bylaw that the province put in at the beginning of COVID and the pandemic, is that becoming permanent?
yeah.
Through to you, Mr. Mayor, with the prohibition related to municipalities having the ability to regulate the delivery of goods and supplies to various businesses. The regulation that was enacted allowing construction to happen 7 days a week between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., that is still only temporary and is due to expire October of this year. And it's unclear whether or not it will be extended or revoked, that regulation.
Okay, well, let's hope they revoke it, but I'm trying to read through some of the legislation, and yeah, it sounds like they might make it permanent, but let's hope that they don't do that. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 8.3, PDS 21098, incorporating a climate lens in town governance and operations. 1, that report number PDS 21-098 be received. 2, that climate change considerations be incorporated into staff reports starting in January 2022. 3, that climate change considerations be incorporated as part of the 2023 budget approval process. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, second. Councillor Thompson. Comments or questions? Councillor Gaertner. Councillor, you're on mute.
I'm thrilled to see this. This has been in the works, not this motion, but this type of initiative has been in the works, I think now for a couple of years, and I'm really glad to see that Aurora is adopting it. And as some of you may know, I had pneumonia over the summer, and so I spent a lot of time at home trying to recover and going through my notes from I went back to 2016 to see what I could throw out. And one of the things that I found was a note to myself and to council: in every discussion at council, in every government decision, see it through the lens of climate change. And when I started with that, trying to, I guess, educate us, the situation was not nearly as dire as it is now. And we've all unfortunately seen many examples of that this past summer. So this is a very important initiative that we're going to be doing. And it's going to be going into the budget process, I believe, this upcoming budget process. So it's just a very important move on the part of our council. And I don't know if we're a leader in this, but I think that this looks good on us, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to the councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Hello, it's on. Thank you. I echo the same things Councillor Gaertner is saying, and commend her for all her hard work prior to committing to climate change. And obviously we've seen a lot more situations with extreme heat, wind, storm tonight, evidently with hail, but we're all inside right now, so we are protected by it, flooding. And I am very happy to see that we're going to be looking at this with the climate lens, and it's going to be fostering some discussion and awareness, and it all starts with education and understanding what our choices are. And it is going to be a tough balance, but you have to start somewhere. So I'm really happy to see that now we have some of the tools that we're going to explore and work with in order to better the climate change that's occurring and help reduce the greenhouse gases and any other kind of initiatives that we can do to help move this forward. It's one planet, one earth, and we got to do what we can. So thanks so much for all your hard work to staff for putting this together and trying to find some sort of way to incorporate this in our operations all across the board, because I know it's not an easy job. There's so many moving parts to any kind of project and all the things that we do, from procurement to infrastructure building. So I really appreciate all that hard work, and I'm sure we'll be continuing to modify and change that process as we learn and go through this together. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, So for a call to vote, I mean, I think that all of us agree that addressing climate change has been a top priority for this town and not only this council, but previous councils as well. So thank you everyone for the hard work. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 8.4. PDS 21-083 assessment of a proposed sidewalk on Metcalfe Street between Aurora Town Square and Town Park. Recommendations are 1, that report number PDS 21-083 be received, and 2, that the town not proceed with the construction of a new sidewalk on the north side of Metcalfe Street between Victoria Street and Wells Street. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, second. Councillor Gallo. Comments or questions on this one? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I support the recommendation. I think when we had the conversation back in March, maybe it was all about ensuring the survival of the trees that were along that side. And it's clear from the report and in the arborists as well that they would be in danger in doing so. But going back to that original report, the intent was to create linkage between the Aurora Town Square and Town Park. The original concept that was thrown back a while before was with regards to a mid-block connection. So I guess with this report, where are we going now with further conversations around, furthering the connection between Town Park and the Aurora Town Square? So I'm not sure who best to direct that to. Mr. Mayor, would it be best to put it to Mr. Waters or Mr. Nadarozny?
I'll direct that to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as council will recall, we did consider a mid-block path, but it seemed problematic from the point of view of the impact it would have, particularly on the residential property, to the would be northeast of the church property, or up in that corner. There's a multi-unit building there, not the converted school, but beside it. And so it would be quite costly for council to create a path through there, given the impact it would have on those two residential properties. So this really leaves us with the other side of Metcalfe Street, maybe enhancing something along that side, making more of a walkway. I'm not sure how many people would use it because it'd be going, first away from Town Park to get to Town Park. So yeah, there's not a lot of alternatives unless we want to revisit the mid-block again and do a little more in-depth analysis of the actual cost of entertaining that option.
Councilor.
Through you to Mr. Nadarozny, I understand the challenge with regards to the mid-block, but I guess, I would still like us to consider some sort of connection, because I think I look long-term towards the development of that whole area and the potential that will come as you slowly see some further changes, both publicly and privately. But, I think the other idea that was floating out there really is Moseley, and looking at Moseley and whether or not you can widen the sidewalk, make it more pedestrian friendly, use that connection there as a potential avenue to strengthen the linkage between the two of them. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we want to create that linkage between the two properties. And so, while we've ruled this one out, and I would agree with you that looking at the other side of Metcalfe Street really is not probably the ideal solution. So that leaves you with Moseley or the mid-block. I'd just like to make sure that we're still, taking this into consideration and looking at the long-term vision of both properties and what could be the future development, because we've talked about it from a cultural precinct perspective that over the long period of time, we certainly see further, perhaps commercial uses, both private and public. And I think that you need to have that connection, be it through Moseley or the mid-block. And so I hope that it'll still stay on the radar and staff will continue to look at ways in which to foster that connection.
Thank you. Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Thompson was sort of touched on many of the ideas that was really one of our initial thoughts, was to keep the connectivity. Really important to have our town square be super connected to all of our downtown core, and having the pathway from there to Town Park and so on would be ideal. So to that, maybe take a look at that mid-park, mid-block area, or think a little bit maybe in terms of signage and, walkways of some sort, pointing, to certain areas to get across that we could use if we have to do a little bit of a roundabout in other ways, or Mosey would be amazing, that we just ensure that there's some sort of clear connectivity for residents to see. And this is more than just for our local residents. We all know where to walk and find. These are for visitors. So it makes it easier for them to explore our downtown and all those areas associated with Town Square. But yeah, it's, understood this doesn't work. I didn't think it would either. But continue the thought process and hopefully come up with a good idea to continue that linkage for sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 8.5, FIN 21-035, 2021 year-end surplus deficit management bylaw and reserve management adjustments. Recommendation 1, that report number FIN 21-035 be received. 2, that the 2021 year-end surplus deficit management bylaw to manage the operating budget surplus or deficit through the use of reserves as detailed in this report be brought forward to a future council meeting for approval. And 3, that the deletion of the 6 reserves identified in this report as no longer being required be approved. And 4, that the treasurer be delegated the authority to delete reserves that are no longer required. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys. Comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I guess, Rachel Wainwright Van Kessel. Just in relation to 4, that the treasurer be delegated the authority to delete reserves that are no longer required. Is that in specific to these 6 reserves only, or is this something that council is approving moving forward to any reserve that the delegated authority you see fit to delete that's above and beyond these 6?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this report identifies the 6 reserves to be deleted and asks for council's approval to do so. What the final recommendation does is, should we be in this situation in the future, then it would delegate the authority to the treasurer to be able to just delete these reserves. So in this case, we have duplicated reserves, reserves that are empty and have not been used for years, or reserves that have been replaced by others.
Councillor.
Thank you. And while I understand the intent and just learning what these reserves are and what they mean, I do think it's a good idea that council is aware of any reserves that you do intend to delete or absolve. And, maybe it gives us an opportunity to ask why that's not being utilized and find out ways we could find a way to maybe fund something that hasn't been funded, or ask questions. And just to arbitrarily not have that opportunity to ask questions, I just would feel more comfortable if we just tonight move forward with the 6 that are being identified tonight, and then moving forward, if there's any other reserves that we're in this situation, that we have that opportunity as council to review that. That would be my recommendation. Question about, I believe you had some, it was about the funds for the library, and there was a line in there about any of the surplus would be handled by the town. And I'm just curious as to if you can just expand on what you mean in that language by that, how the town would be handling that.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in the past, before 2020, any surplus that was seen by the library, they would contribute it to their reserve. In recent years, they have started making contributions to their capital reserves. So they now have those in their actual base budget. So they're not dependent on surpluses for that. So what would happen is in the case if they have a surplus, it would come back to the town as that budget variance. And we would then contribute that to the repair and replacement reserve for facilities, which is the reserve that's used to manage the facilities that they use.
Councillor?
Thank you. So just really a change in procedure and how it will be utilized moving forward. And the funds are still allocated towards specifically to the library itself, but not anything beyond that. Is that correct?
Swear Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So they would be directed to the repair and replacement reserve for facilities, which deals with all asset management for town facilities. And the library uses town facilities. So this is the way to most directly without actually creating a separate reserve for library facilities, because they wouldn't actually contribute enough over time just through surpluses to manage those.
Councillor?
Interesting. Okay, I will pass the baton to another colleague, but I would elect to remove number 4 in the recommendation if we get around to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gaertner first, and then Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I on? I am on. I think that's a very good move with respect to the library surplus. I think it makes sense. Very glad it was proposed. With respect to the tree compensation fund, I think that also is good to create a reserve for that. I was trying to get some answers, and I didn't speak to you in advance, Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, so perhaps you can answer next week if I caught you off guard. But with respect to the balance in the compensation fund at the moment, does that include money from Shining Hill?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would have to get back to you on the details.
Thank you. Thank you. I did drop the ball on that. I apologize. Thank you very much.
Is that all, Councillor?
Yes, and with respect to what Councillor, well, no, sorry, with respect to what Councillor Gilland is proposing, I mean, I'm going to assume that you've gone through all of our reserve funds with a fine-tooth comb, and these funds that you're suggesting for removal, I mean, is it likely we're going to have something in the future? And if it is, I certainly agree that council should know about it before it's removed from the roster. But is that something that would be done automatically, or should we have a motion that says that specifically?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So for these reserves in particular, they don't actually have balances sitting in them because they're duplications or redundant reserves. If we were to actually try and move money out of reserve to be able to delete the reserve, we'd actually need council authority to do that prior to doing anything with the reserve, because you can't close a reserve that has a current balance in it.
Councillor.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo.
Just along those lines, strange. We have this in front of us because clearly, as it stands, the treasurer does not have authority to delete reserves. But in the report, we're adding some reserves. So I'm assuming that the treasurer does have authority to add reserves. I see a nod, but just to clarify, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, through the delegation of authority bylaw, I can create reserves.
Councillor.
So, my preference is also to have it before council, but, and we're reporting on an annual basis. I don't have an issue with the delegated authority to close reserves that don't have any money in them, but I would like to have a reporting aspect to this on an annual basis that the treasurer has delegated authority to close that doesn't have any balance in them, but also reports on an annual basis and kind of gives us a summary of why that's being done. If anything, I would add that to that last recommendation number 4.
Ms. Mayor Van Kessel, would it just come back in the report at the year end?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it could come back as a report at year end or through fiscal strategy updates.
Thank you. But council, if you want to add that, just to make sure that's fine. I mean, we'll get to it. I'll come back to you. Is that all? Okay. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. And I appreciate all the work that Mrs. Wainwright Van Kessel is doing from a fiscal strategy as well as from a financial perspective. Personally, I'm comfortable with her decision making and with delegating authority with regards to the reserves. I think what may help council is providing some context or criteria around which you would close reserve accounts. As you stated tonight, those are all accounts that can't have money and otherwise you need council authority. And by defining some of that, I think it helps councillor understand as a whole the intent and what you can and cannot do. And that may make some more comfortable than others. I know for myself, I am familiar with that with regards to some of the conversations we've had in the past. I think reporting out on an annual basis, as Councillor Gallo mentioned, is reasonable. Certainly from a year-end perspective, staff present council with a year-end balance with all of our reserve accounts. And I think at that time, it would be reasonable to make notation of what's been added as a reserve account or deleted. And that could be part of the conversation at that time. And other than that, I'm comfortable with what's before us.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
I might shut myself up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I mean, I should say just ditto Councillor Thompson and Councillor Gallo. I mean, I think I'm extremely confident in our chief financial officer, and I feel that I'm not worried about any. In fact, when I'm looking at the reserves that were noted, they're duplicate, no longer required, the debt fully paid in the library. So having a year-end update on what was done is perfect. I don't want to stop the process, the due diligence in our finances, making those changes, happen when they're to happen. It keeps us in good financial standing, and that's really important to me. Plus, we have our financial committee. So between all the checks and balances that go on, having a year-end report to provide that sort of what's happened, little picture, would be perfect for me. I'm very confident in the abilities in our organization for this. So, and I'm very comfortable with what's before us here this evening. So I'm okay with that, and having a year-end report would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gilliland. Actually, just Councillor Gilliland, before you speak, I know it's our first time back, so I just want to give everyone just a little fresh reminder of how the mics work, because I know it seems like we're all having problems with it. When you push it, your name pops up to speak, the clerk will turn it on. So if you push the button again, you turn off your mic. So just a reminder, so don't push your button again until you want to turn off your mic, okay? All right, Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. Just to get some clarity, just if you could. So what you're suggesting is that the delegated authority that you're seeking is for accounts that have a zero balance, and any reserves that did have a balance would in fact have to come back to council as per what's being put forward today.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. If a reserve has a balance, you cannot close it. And the only way I would be able to move the balance from that reserve is with council authority.
Councillor.
Thank you for that clarity. So I appreciate that. That does make it a lot different. I do like the fact that if we could amend and put in there to add a report so we understand what has been deleted or removed for whatever reason, so we can ask the questions why for various reasons. Out of curiosity, I know that the heritage one was duplicated and it was not necessary. I'm just kind of curious as to maybe why that occurred.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we actually went through a number of reserves that have been around for quite some time. So this is like the first time since I started here that we've done that wholesale review of them. So I don't have the reasons as to why they were duplicated at this point, but we recognize that they were. in this case where some of these reserves were no longer required. So this was just a review of what we have, a very high level reserve review of what we have at this point.
Councillor?
Thank you. I guess with that, I mean, I would like to see that language added to the fourth, if I may, Mr. Mayor, add a report, an annual report at the end of the year.
I think, Councillor, I think I've got a fifth clause, and I was going to get Councillor Gallo to put it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Councillor Gallo can.
We already, so I'll just read it out because I think that our clerk was getting it ready because he saw what we were going to do.
Perfect. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so council, if I could get someone to move it and second it, fifth clause, if everyone's good with it, that the treasurer report to council annually on reserves that have been opened and closed. Okay, Councillor Gallo? Move. Councillor Gillen, second. Anyone want to speak to that? Councillor Gaertner, I know I have you on a speaking, but do you want to speak to this amendment? Or do you want to just speak when I go back to the main motion? You're on mute, Councillor?
I was going to second it, but I didn't realize it had been seconded. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Call a vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Back to the main motion as amended. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Gaertner, go ahead. Second time.
Thank you. With respect to number 4, I think Councillor Thompson made some very good comments about just clarifying it, elaborating it, and I think Ms. Van Kessel heard them. So perhaps that could be added for next week.
Okay.
Is that okay? It doesn't need an amendment, does it?
No, it doesn't need an amendment. I guess we'll just.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Yeah, Councillor? No?
Sorry, I lost my audio.
Oh, new business. Do you have any new business?
I do. With respect to the closed session, I didn't make a comment. So I just want to say for the record that I couldn't vote for this as I don't believe it's in the best interest of the adjoining neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all for new business?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gillen.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I guess, Mr. Mayor, I had missed the last special council meeting in August, I believe 17th or 16th. And at the very end of the meeting, because I did watch it online after the fact, I was on holiday, you had mentioned that because of Councillor Kim's absence through GC rotation, that you would acclaim chair for this session. So does that mean come next cycle that it would rotate to the next councillor now that we're in person? I was told by Mr. Nadarozny that you would be addressing some clarity to that tonight.
Oh, I didn't think I need to address clarity, but sure. In a councillor's absence, when they're supposed to be chairing, traditionally the mayor chairs, and unless someone wants to put forward a motion for someone else to chair at that time. But yeah, we are within the regular cycle, and the only reason I'm chairing tonight is because in the absence of Councillor Kim, who was up in the normal rotation at this point, is absent. So therefore, I'm sitting in the chair tonight. As far as the next GC, it would still be Councillor Kim, depending on what happens in the election. I guess we'll discuss that as we go forward. But then beyond that, we move into our regular cycle, and it would be Councillor Gaertner up next.
Great, thank you. And I guess the other question I wanted to know was if, for some reason, if the election was successful for Councillor Kim, do we have something in place to address replacing Councillor Kim if he is elected? Is that something that is I just have a lot of questions from some residents that are wondering what the process would be. And I know it's close to that 1 year mark, and I just didn't know if there was a process or procedure in place for that maybe you can enlighten us.
Under the Municipal Act, we would decide whether we would appoint a new member or we would hold a by-election.
Thank you.
That's all. That's all?
Yep.
Councillor Humphries? No new business? Councillor Thompson? Councillor Gallo? Public service announcements. I'll go the other way. Councillor Gallo? No. Councillor Thompson? No. Councillor Humphries? Public service? Go ahead.
To you, Mr. Mayor, just a couple of things. First of all, don't forget your favorite farmers market every Saturday at 8 in the morning, 1 p.m. at Town Park. It's incredible. The vendors have been really thrilled this year with the great response. I can tell you, run safely, went well. We've had, touch wood, no instances. Thank you to staff for their incredible support. It's been incredible, positive experience. I can tell you there's been record numbers this year, over 1,800 in 1 day. Not this past weekend, the weekend before. So there's people are coming from everywhere. It's a lovely market, lovely place to have it at. So hopefully you can see everyone there on Saturdays. I also just wanted to say it was a really busy weekend. And I know Mr. Mayor may speak on some of these things, but the Rib Fest was really incredible. And I want to thank the Optimist, right? That the Rotary. The Rotary. They're doing such a great job. Just always happy, thrilled to be there, doing tons of work. And one of the highlights for a lot of people was just looking at the taste tester, the judges for the best ribs and things like that. It's a really tough one that's sitting at this table. But anyway, it was really well done. And you know, many residents, I'm sure we've all heard, they've reached out to us and just happy to see things coming back. And we just hope that we can continue in this format and run things very safely, but continue to enjoy this amazing town and all the great things that are coming ahead. That's about it for me, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say again, thanks to staff. You know, I have to mention Shelley, she's such an incredible person, the hard work that she does, and she's there nonstop. So I just wanted to share that again. I know she says it's a team behind her, and I know there is, but she's just one of a kind. We're lucky to have her. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yellen, public service announcement.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention the great job the Aurora Cultural Center has been doing with the Aurora Pops Up campaign. They often have shows that pop up within Aurora. Please go to Aurora Cultural website to see what new shows that will be there. I can tell you that there will be one at Maples Alley at Thursday at 7 p.m. and one at Copeland Park on Saturday, 11:15. So continue to look and see where these exciting musical pop-ups will be. In addition, there's always some other action going on in Maples Alley, which is great. I also wanted to mention that we have an event on Sunday at 5:30 that it will be hosted by the Aurora Black community. And they're doing an official launch that day. They were rained out, unfortunately, to a storm similar to one that we had today. So hopefully they won't be stormed out. So please come on down to Town Park. It's going to be a lot of fun, some games, food trucks, and some exciting things happening there. So Town Park Sunday at 5:30 and Aurora Arts and Culture. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gaertner, public service announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, a great thank you to Shelley Ware and her team and their competent action during the storm on Saturday evening. With respect to Sunday at 5:30, even though the event last a couple weeks ago was rained out, was it only last week? People stayed and there was a lot of spirit. So come out Sunday. Also, a sincere thank you to Loris Herenda and Yellow Brick House for their excellent work during a very challenging time of COVID when violence increased against women and children by 30%. They were recognized by the Chamber of Commerce for their resilience. And just two things that I'd like us to keep in mind. The first one is that the Yellow Brick House Shelter operates 41 beds and 10 cribs, but they only received 25% government funding. So fundraising is crucial. And I've never heard anything like this. The money that they get from fundraising, 92% goes to direct services and only 8% goes to administration. I think that must be a record for any not-for-profit. Also, last night was the beginning of the Jewish high holidays, Rosh Hashanah. And today I attended a Zoom service and we sang a very beautiful prayer, but I am not going to sing it for you. I won't make you endure that, but these are part of the words, and it is, the wish is for everyone to have healing of the body and the spirit, and healing of the land, and peace for all people, every race and religion. So I think that's a beautiful message that we can send forward, not only on behalf of the holiday, but just as a general gift of wishes for all of us. And that's all I've got, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gaertner. I just have a few. Councillor Gaertner, speaking of Yellow Brick House, you're correct, the tremendous work that they do. And not only did I finally have my first meeting with Minister Clark in regards to the Bloomington lands, and we had a good first discussion. We'll see where that goes, and I'll update all of council on any further discussions that we have on those properties. But he also did come and tour Yellow Brick House as with MPP Parsa, as they were recipients of just under $150,000 in funding from phase 2 of the Social Services Relief Fund to help them renovate the facility. And we took a walk through it. They've done a tremendous job in doing some upgrades to the property. And as you said, they do tremendous work for our community and all of York Region as well. I did want to talk also about Multicultural Festival, which wasn't mentioned on Saturday. So while you're at the town park enjoying the farmers market, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., we have our annual Multicultural Festival, where we can all celebrate town's cultural heritage and diversity. It's going to be a great time. There's lots to do. There's some virtual and in-person experiences. There's going to be dancing. There's going to be music. So lots to do for everyone. So I encourage everyone to come out and enjoy it. Obviously, COVID protocols will be in place to ensure that everyone remains safe. And if you want more information on that, you can go to aurora.ca/multicultural festival. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And something you haven't heard in a long time. We are adjourned.